Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're cracking open a really significant set of your sources, excerpts from the third chapter of the Great Koran, the one known as the Family of Amram, or Surah Aal-e-Imran.
That's right. And these specific verses, they give us some deep insights into core beliefs, how a community based on those beliefs operates, the challenges they face.
And how they're guided through them.
Exactly. Guidance is key.
So our mission here is to take these verses you've brought, unpack the main ideas, and sort of figure out what they're telling us about faith, resilience, relationships, both inside and, well, outside the community.
Yeah, we want to pull out some really interesting nuggets for you, get to the heart of the principles and the practical wisdom in these passages.
Okay, let's dive right into your sources.
All right. So kicking things off, these verses establish something absolutely fundamental. It's just not okay for any human, prophet, angel, anyone to tell people, worship me.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Straight out of the gate, a core rule.
A non-negotiable one. Worship God and God alone. That's the message.
So it directly counters any idea of, like, elevating the messenger to divine status.
Precisely. Verse 3.80 is super direct. It says, don't take angels or prophets as lords. It even asks, would someone command you to disbelieve after you've already become submitters?
Submitters, right? Those who've submitted to God's will.
It hammers home that the call is always to God, never to the messenger themselves.
Got it. And speaking of messengers, verse 3.81 introduces this really fascinating idea, doesn't it? A covenant?
Yeah, a covenant God took with all the prophets. Every single one.
All of them. Even those before.
Mm-hmm. A commitment from them to believe in and actively support a future messenger who would come later and, importantly, confirm what they brought. It points to this long chain, this continuity.
Like a single story unfolding through history. You really see that pick up in 3.84, right? Where believers are told to declare their faith in what was revealed.
Exactly. We have believed in God and what has been revealed to us and what was revealed to Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, and the grandsons, and so on. It includes Moses, Jesus, all the prophets.
We do not differentiate between any of them, and we are submitters. That really ties it all together, this single divine source.
It does, yeah. It grounds everything in this shared history of prophecy. And then 3.164 adds another layer. It says, sending a messenger among the believers is a specific favor from God.
A favor? How so?
Well, the messenger's job isn't passive. It's reciting verses, purifying people, teaching the book and the wisdom. And it specifically notes, before this, they were in clear error. So it highlights the huge impact of this guidance.
So it's both receiving the word and being actively taught and, well, refined by it.
Right. And all this circles back to that core idea from 3.83, submission. Submission to God's religion. It says everything. Heavens, earth, it all submits, willingly or unwillingly.
And believers are specifically told in 3.102, be submitters.
Mm-hmm. It frames submission not just as, a religious choice, but as the fundamental way things are and the conscious choice for believers.
Okay, so we have this foundation, belief, submission, the role of messengers. How do these verses then talk about community, relationships, especially with those outside the faith? There's some pretty strong warnings in there.
Oh, definitely. Verses 3.9899, they speak directly to certain people of the book, usually taken to mean Jews and Christians in this context. It asks why some would disbelieve God's signs or actively try to, push believers off God's path.
Trying to make it seem crooked, the text says, even though they're witnesses or have knowledge themselves.
Right. And that leads straight into a very direct instruction in 3.1000. Believers, do not obey a group from those given the book.
Why not?
Because the text warns they would turn you back into disbelievers after you've already found faith. It's blunt. And it echoes later in 3.149, warning that obeying disbelievers just leads to becoming losers.
Wow, so it's not just a suggestion. It's a command for self-preservation of faith.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is how this caution extends beyond just theological debate into personal relationships. Verse 3.118 warns about who you let into your inner circle.
Your entourage, it calls them. Close contacts.
Yeah, people from outside the community who don't genuinely wish you well. It says, you might see some hatred in what they say, but what's hidden in their hearts is much, much bigger.
And this is where that really vivid language comes in, 3.119. That says, you might love them, but they don't love you.
Mm-hmm. And when they're alone, they bite their fingertips out of rage against you.
That image is incredibly powerful. It speaks volumes about hidden animosity, right?
Yeah.
Despite maybe a friendly face.
It really does. But then, crucially, the very next verse, 3.120, gives the counter strategy, the solution.
Which is?
If you endure and become pious, their scheme will not harm you at all.
So your internal state, patience, piety, steadfastness, That's your defense.
It acts like a shield. Their plotting, their negativity, it can't actually hurt you if you're strong and grounded on the inside. God knows their schemes, it says.
That's a huge point. Inner strength trumps outer malice. And building that strength seems linked to unity within the community. Verse 3.103 is that call, isn't it? Stick to the rope of God altogether and do not be separated.
Yes, and it reminds them of God's blessing, how they used to be enemies, but God united their hearts, made them brothers, saved them from the edge of a pit of fire.
Using memory to reinforce the value of sticking together?
Absolutely. That unity is precious. And 3.104 adds another piece about community structure. It says there should be a specific group among believers.
What for?
To actively call people to good, command what's right, and forbid what's wrong. And those people, it says, are the successful ones. It suggests like a specific role for maintaining standards.
Okay, so strong internal community, caution with external ties unless they're sincere. Let's shift then to facing hardship. Trials. These verses don't shy away from that, do they?
Not at all. They're very realistic. Verse 3.165 talks about misfortune striking. And 3.166 explicitly says that what happened to them, often understood as the Battle of Uhud, a really tough time.
A major setback, yeah.
That it happened by God's permission.
But 3.165 has that really introspective angle. When misfortune hits, it says, remember, you faced things twice as bad before. And if you ask, why us? How did this happen? The answer is,
it is from yourselves.
oof, that's tough. What does that mean exactly?
Well, it suggests that while God allows trials, maybe something about the community's own state, their actions or lack thereof, played a part in how that trial impacted them. It's not just random bad luck. There's an element of self-reflection, of accountability.
So looking inward, not just outward.
Right. And 3.166, 167 add another layer. God allows these things partly to expose people, to show who the real believers are and who the hypocrites are, those who say one thing with their mouths but don't mean it in their hearts.
So trials are a sort of purification process, a test that reveals true colors.
You could say that. They reveal what's really inside. And the context often involves striving, even fighting, as mentioned in 3.121 and 3.143.
So in those incredibly difficult situations, what's the guidance?
Patience, perseverance, it comes up again and again. Verse 3.146 holds up the example of prophets and spiritual leaders who fought alongside them. They faced setbacks in God's cause, but they didn't fail, they didn't weaken, they didn't give up.
And God loves the patience.
Exactly. And that 3.142 puts it right to you. Do you think you'll just waltz into paradise without God knowing who among you truly strives and who is truly patient?
So patience isn't passive, it's active endurance.
Absolutely. It's steadfastness. Verse 3.2 Surah sums it up. Be steadfast, be patient, be united. And the verses also address death, especially being killed in God's way. 3.145 says death happens only by God's permission at a set time.
Okay, so a sense of divine decree.
Yes, but 3.157, 158 frame it differently. Dying or being killed in God's way. That leads to forgiveness and mercy from God, which is presented as far better than anything you could accumulate in this world.
So it reframes the ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah.
Through all this opposition, internal tests, hardship, even death, but the constant refrain, the anchor.
Reliance on God. Tawakkul. Verse 3.159 is very practical. Consult with others, yes. But once you've made a decision, put your trust in God. Because God loves those who trust him.
And 3.160 gives that ultimate perspective.
Right. If God helps you, no one can defeat you. If he abandons you, well, who else is there? So believers should rely only on God.
That sense of total reliance seems absolutely central to navigating everything these verses describe. Okay, so looking at the end game, what are the outcomes described for those who follow this path versus those who turn away?
Well, for those who turn away after accepting the covenant, verse 3.82 is pretty blunt. They are described as the immoral.
And that image in 3.117, for those who harm themselves through their actions, maybe spending wealth in ways that displease God.
It's like a destructive wind hitting their harvest, wiping it out. And the verse stresses, God didn't wrong them, they wronged themselves.
It really drives home the idea of accountability.
Verse 3.161 says, anyone who trespasses or cheats, they'll carry that burden on the day of resurrection. Every single soul gets paid back exactly what it earned. No one gets wronged. Your actions have direct consequences.
And 3.162 draws that stark contrast.
Yeah. Is someone seeking God's good pleasure the same as someone who earns God's wrath and ends up in hell? It calls hell a wretched destiny.
A clear difference. And this reads that fascinating idea in 3.163 about degrees.
Right. It's not just pass-fail. People have different degrees at God and deed, different levels, different stations. It suggests your actions, your sincerity, that inner state we talked about. It all determines your rank, your closeness to God, and God sees it all.
Okay, so levels of outcome. What about the positive side, the rewards?
Verses 3.147 and 148 talk about those who pray for forgiveness, for strength, for victory. They get both the reward of this world and the best reward of the hereafter. God loves the benevolent, those who go the extra mile in doing good.
And gratitude is rewarded too.
Yes, 3.144, 145 say God rewards the grateful. And for the truly pious, 3.198 paints that picture of paradise gardens, rivers, living there forever. What's with God, it says, is better for the pious.
It's interesting, though, that even for the people of the book who received earlier warnings, there's still acknowledgement of positive outcomes for some.
There is. Verse 3.199 is specific. Among them are those who do believe in God, who are submissive, humble, and don't sell out God's verses for a cheap price. Their reward is with God.
So it comes back to genuine belief in action, regardless of the group label.
It seems so. It reinforces that sincerity matters. Oh, and importantly, regarding those killed in God's way, verse 3.169 says, don't think of them as dead.
No.
No, they are alive with their Lord being provided for. It completely reframes martyrdom.
Wow. Okay, so bringing this all together, we've gone through belief, community, trials, outcomes. What's the overarching wisdom here? Why lay all this out?
Well, verse 3.138 says it plainly. This is declaration for the people and as guidance and preachment for the pious. It's meant to inform, to guide, to remind those who are mindful of God.
And reflection is key, right? Look at the past.
Exactly. 3.137 says, travel the earth, see what happened to those who deny the truth. History is a teacher.
And there's wisdom in the messenger's example, too, that gentleness, seeking forgiveness for others, consulting them.
3.159 gives that model for leadership, compassionate, consultative, reliant on God.
And revisiting that challenging idea that sometimes misfortune comes from yourselves, that definitely requires reflection.
It does. And underpinning so much of this is the constant reminder. God knows. He knows what's hidden in hearts, 3.119. He knows what people conceal, 3.167. That divine awareness connects everything, accountability, sincerity, those different degrees.
It all seems to weave together. Like 3.101 asks, how could you disbelieve when God's verses are being recited, the messengers among you? Sticking to God, that's the straight path. And 3.118 saying, these verses are clear if you just use your reason.
The invitation is there. Understand, reflect, apply.
So, wrapping up this deep dive into your sources on the family of Amram, we've really seen that absolute core. Worship God alone, accept all the prophets, submit. We've explored the tricky dynamics of community, those warnings about outside influences, but also the power of inner piety as protection.
And we looked hard at facing trials, the need for patience, for reliance on God, and the idea that trials can actually reveal your true state. Plus, the clear link between actions, intentions, and ultimate outcomes, both good and bad.
The big theme seemed to be about, telling true faith from hypocrisy, navigating challenges from outside and inside yourself, and finding strength in unity and trusting God.
Yeah, it's a really rich tapestry covering faith, community, struggle, and the divine perspective.
Definitely gives you a lot to chew on about what faith means in practice.
A deep look at human nature and our relationship with the divine, for sure.
Okay, here's a final thought for you to take away, something to ponder based on these verses. The text keeps stressing that God knows what's hidden, the essence of the bosoms, what you conceal. If you really take that on board, the idea that your deepest intentions, your inner reality, are completely transparent to the divine. How does that change how you think about your outward actions? Sure, but also your thoughts, your motives, the very core of who you are trying to be.